So, I have some question for you. Do you think we can understand nature without its people? Or people without understand their natural environment? And what is nature? Well, as you all know, I'm doing a PhD in conservation, and every time I tell to my friends about my research, at the beginning they always think that I might be a wildlife lover or a natural lover, but the reality is that I never really be so much interested in wildlife. I mean, don't take me wrong, I really like nature. And I remember when I was a child, I really loved to go barefoot on the grass of my garden or go to the field with my dad. And I remember the wind blowing on my hair, but I really never had this idea of nature. Nature for us was everything, was the fruit we used to eat from the trees, was the place we used to live, and the sea we used to jump in. I was rather much more interested in people. You know, I come from an island, so which is called Sardinia, and you know, being from an island, I was really curious about the world out there and the different kind of language, religions, different culture. So when I had to decide what to study at the university, I was sure I wanted to study anthropology. But then my mom told me, which kind of job are you going to find with a degree in anthropology? And then I said, okay, I might study languages. And among all the languages that there are in this world, I decided to study Hindi. I really don't know how I convinced my mother that study Hindi was better than study anthropology, but here I am. So after my degree in Hindi, I went to India, where I studied, I worked, and I lived. And it is really over there, while I was traveling in India, that I really understood how nature shaped people and the reverse. In fact, the people that were living in the high mountains of the Himalaya, they were very different from the people that were living close to the sea, or at the edge of a river, or inside a forest. In one of those trips, I went to visit the Kaziranga National Park, which is located in the northeast state of India, just after Bangladesh and almost close to China. Kaziranga is a very beautiful grassland forest, shaped by the continuous movement of the river, the Brahmaputra. The Brahmaputra is the spine of a sun, and every year, its flood shape and determine the territory. In this territory, sometimes the land exists, and sometimes the land does not exist. In fact, the river over there shaped the land, and in the shaping the land every year, some silty island, or called also sapori, they come out from the river. I remember the first time I went to visit a sapori. It was a misty and cold morning, and close to the river, a lot of people, men and women, they were waiting for the boat to cross the river. From the boat, the landscape was a mix of water and sand. From one side, the park. From the other, people's land. When we arrive in the Sapori are very beautiful and fertile land, and they're mostly inhabited by the Missing tribal community. The Missing, they don't have an idea of owning a land. And in fact, as I said, in this area, the land is very unpredictable. And for them, whoever cultivates a land, the land does belong to them. So, what is the point of owning a land, the people used to tell me? The people in this place, the people, the plants, and the animal, they all have really adapted to this movement of the nature and to this dramatic regime of the fluvial process. And one of the most amazing examples of this creative nurturing of the flood is the one-horned rhino, one of the most representative animals of Assam. When I saw a rhino, oh my God, it was a very beautiful and majestic animal with a very rough and dark skin and a very serious and calm expression. It looks almost like a prehistoric animal that connects the past with the future. It's really the beauty and the rare of this animal that makes Kaziranga so famous and important all around the world. So it was really not long after that trip that I came back in New Delhi, where I was living at the time. I was working as a human rights researcher, and at the time we organized a meeting over there, and in the meeting, one person stood up. he was a young leader from Kaziranga. And he started to tell us that in Kaziranga, the local community, they were harassed in the name of conservation, and because of poaching, new paramilitary forces were deployed in the area, and according to him, some youth were falsely accused of poaching, and sometimes even killed. His words really rumbled in my ears, and I couldn't believe that conservation, something good, was in conflict with the people. It is at the time that I actually also learned that Kaziranga was going to be expanded, and most probably the people that I met in those sapori were going to be displaced. At the time, then I decided that I wanted to understand better about this conflict, and I went back there as a researcher. Over there, while I was navigating the space, I met Prakash. Prakash was a young man from the missing community that he helped me to go in the different villages. Prakash was a very smart and introvert guy, one of the few that left the community to go and study at the university. I remember we used to go around in his motorbike, and he was very passionate about butterfly, and he always has his small binoculars with him. And Prakash told me that when he was young, he used to go and play in the park with his friends, and going and grazing and fishing with his dad, and also collecting firewood with his mom. But now, for him, the only way to enter in the park was to be a volunteer in a conservation NGO. In fact, when I interviewed the local authority, they told me that the local community, because of poverty, they were starting to kill the rhino in order to sell the horn, and that's the reason why there were restrictions and the community wasn't allowed to enter anymore in the park. However, Prakash told me a slightly different story. And he told me that before, the local community were actually involved in the forest department, and they were working as a forest guard. But then, when new funding came into place and new policies started to be implemented, a new kind of bureaucratic system was created, and the forest guards were now recruited directly from the city. The local people, without a job anymore, and also without the possibility to access to the natural resources, and also a little bit because of revenge, they started to be engaged in poaching activities, including his dad. In one of those days, of course, that I was conducting several interviews with different people, I also went to visit his dad, an ex-poacher. His dad was living in a very beautiful bamboo house, tilty bamboo house, very close to the park. And when I arrived, he welcomed me with chai, tea, and biscuit. And then he looked at the park. And he told me, we've always been the guardian of this place, in a very proud way. And then he told me that he has been working in the forest department for almost 10 years, earning only $15 per month. He was hoping for a better salary tomorrow, but then suddenly they were all thrown out. So what he was supposed to do? Was it not an injustice? He told me. And then while we were having this conversation, a woman was passing by and he heard us speaking, and she started to shout, "Now they think we are all poachers, and that we are all stealing from our land, and they're killing our children." And then she looked at me and she said, "Beta, daughter, we are not thieves. This is our land, this is our resources. If not us, who will save Kaziranga?" Well, the park got militarized to save and protect the rhino, and maybe even reduce poaching, the people really felt disconnected. The fencing that has been now created between the animal and the people is creating a new category of people shaped by security policy that have been lost in their own land and in their own culture. It was really a strange feeling when I was living in one of those missing houses, and in the morning I could see a tourist jeep safari passing by, and us, on the other side of the fencing, we could maybe see a rhino, only from far away. The natural movement of the river, the animal, and the plants, they're all been eroded by the artificial limit created by the authority to protect the park. But when I was there, I was wondering, how can we create limits in a place which is always on the move? And won't be safer to protect the rhino together with the people that are, that have always adapted to the movement of nature, and want by recognizing the lifestyle of community as a solution to really protect and save both rhino and people, rather than creating fleets and limits that will be probably destroyed every year, or fences and fine that will create only violence and conflict. If I go back to my land, to Sardinia, and I think about its beauty, what would happen if tomorrow a strict protected area would be created close to my place? What if I cannot jump anymore in my sea? What if the fishermen cannot fish anymore? What if my dad will lose its land? Won't I also become a poacher? Won't I also steal from my own land? I'm wondering, and I have been thinking, is it not alienation of people from their own land that create violence and conflict that maybe would be resolved if we are all included, honored, and recognized? It is on this thought that I decided to stand for people's rights and conservation and not turn back till we recognize that harmony that recognizes us as part of nature.